So today is maybe the biggest day on my channel because I finally get the opportunity to talk to Francesco Nepitello himself. And while Francesco certainly needs no introduction, I'm going to give him one anyways. He's been designing games for nearly 30 years with over 50 credits to his name. And some very notable games include War of the Ring, The Battle of Five Armies, Hunt for the Ring, Age of Conan, Marvel Heroes, and most recently, Dune, War for Arrakis. His games have also won and been nominated for many awards, but mostly I have him here today to talk about the excellent RPG, The One Ring. So thanks so much for joining me today, Francesco.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
Awesome. So when you first started getting into game design, what was it that you wanted to accomplish or that you didn't see in the gaming space that you wanted to create?
Well, in the beginning, I didn't have a clear idea of what I wanted to accomplish. I wanted to be a game designer. That's for sure. Um, it was always me and Marco Maggi, my co-designer. We started this career together. We wanted to be involved in something creative, and we were attempting different things like writing stories, and we wrote something for movies. So there were different avenues that we were exploring, and but we were very avid gamers. So we were playing board games and role playing games since a long time, both with friends and our siblings. So um, there was a moment when we realized that the gaming landscape was not as crowded as other possible creative endeavors. I mean, it was much. It seemed that we had more chances if we tried to do something in gaming, and also we felt very much like to have some sort of skills that could be used there because we were already playing a lot and writing stories and writing scenarios. And in my particular case, I think I owe something to my older brother Giuliano because he was the guy making the rules for all the games that we played when we were kids. And so I had a good example of some of the idea of creating games instead of simply playing games by other people. And so, yeah, that was it. And we were lucky to meet a number of like minded people here in Venice, in the city. I mean, like 20 meters away from my house, there was a gaming club where people played backgammon mainly. And but there, one of the associates was Alex Randolph, who was an extremely prolific American game designer who lived in Venice for more than 30 years. And he created around him, there was a sort of a cabal of people interested in gaming and so on, and in game design. And so we got in contact with this kind of people and thought that it was possible to do something. And eventually, we started working with what was possibly the only existing game studio at the time in Italy, or at least one of the few, called Studio Giochi. And so we started doing things for them, and our breakthrough and what probably sent us to the path we're still treading was that the studio was able to get an assignment to do a role playing game for a major company, a major publishing company in Italy, and that was our first. Eventually, it became our first game, published in 1993, called Lex Arcana, who is now enjoying a new edition, by the way, also in English after more than 25 years. That was it. That was the very beginning.
And so you've obviously had a very long career. What are some of the big changes that you've seen over the years from a game developer?
Well, it was a back and forth in the interest of the players and the type of games that people are interested in. For example, when we started, there was a huge interest in role playing games. I'm talking about the late '80s and early '90s. But then, '93, Magic the Gathering came out, and people started to identify role playing games with Magic the Gathering, even if Magic the Gathering was not a role playing game. But
Right.
so if you had an interest in fantasy, where 10 years before you would end up playing Dungeons and Dragons, after 1993 you would end up playing Magic the Gathering,
Okay.
and also it was that type of game where you just played that. It was an all encompassing passion for a lot
Right.
of people. So we saw that, And interesting enough, our first game was published in 1993, exactly when Magic came out. So we had this peak and immediate interest in the public that made the game very well known. But then there was an immediate downfall because everybody was just playing Magic the Gathering. And so we were able to publish a couple of expansions, and that was it. But it was interesting because the game was so well distributed that people kept thinking about that game because they started playing that maybe instead of Dungeons and Dragons, depending on the generation, of course. And so eventually, when 25 years later, the company decided to make a new edition of the game, we got involved and we did it again. But anyway, yeah, the changes, apart from Magic the Gathering, there were so many. Luckily, instead of dying out, as many people prophesied that the board games, tabletop board games, would end up as something that nobody was interested in doing, it kept going strong and even stronger in the last decade or so. I think that probably the main change was when big companies started being interested in distributing board games that were not simply Monopoly or Risk, because that changed the standard, especially when Asmodee got into the fight. And I mean, Fantasy Flight was one of the major movers at the time, one of the major companies that made a big change, because they created basically the whole American type of design,
Right.
that was not simply roll move, but was not only it was not simply a super abstract German design type of game. So they started pushing for those thematic games.
Right.
And that was a change that me and Marco and Roberto Di Maggio, our co-designer for War of the Ring, were very lucky to be able to exploit. Because when we designed War of the Ring was a game that, if it was published 10 years before, it would end up being published probably, I don't know, in 1,000 copies maybe,
Right.
for super passionate people. And instead, that game was published exactly in the moment where people started being interested in heavier games.
Okay.
If the theme guaranteed a more thematic experience. I think that our game was part of the change, because the success of the game, together with games like Twilight Imperium, were those titles that told people that you don't have to settle for simpler games like Ticket to Ride. You can have, if you like something that is more involving, you can have something. And then it was more and more like that with bigger games and lots of miniatures. So though I think that those were the main changes. Now we have a panorama where you can have super simple games like Flip 7, or very simple card games, or but companies like Asmodee, for example, and Simon before, were pushing games that tried to be accessible, but not to the expense of the theme.
Yeah.
And so I think that now fans of games in general have a lot to enjoy.
The first game of yours that I played was War of the Ring with my brother. We were just astounded by the complexity, but then also how close the game ended up being. Like, we've probably only played it 4 times because it's such a big game, but every time it's right down to the wire. So how do you play test a game that's that expansive to dial it in that well?
Well, the playtesting process for War of the Ring was particularly daunting, considering that the game is extremely asymmetric, and also that it was before the possibility of playing online very intensively. Because I can tell you that right now, when we playtest games like War for Arakkis, for example, it is easier to get playtesters on board, because, for example, you can do a tabletop simulator
Okay.
module, and at the time, all playtesters had to print their own mock-up of the game,
Right.
and you can understand that the mock-up for a game like Lord of the Ring was pretty complex.
Yeah.
You had to print a board that was 2 meters by 1 meter, by 140, but a huge board, lots of counters, hundreds of cards, and so we were lucky that Tolkien enthusiasts can do anything for to follow their passion. And so we had on board a big number of extremely dedicated playtesters. In the beginning, we got them from a site called Consim World, a website for simulation gamers.
Okay.
Because at its very heart, World of the Ring is a simulation game. It's a strategy game. It's the air of games like Panzer Leader and those war games in the 70s, from the 70s. So people that were interested in those type of games jumped immediately on board and play tested the heck out of the game. I mean, we had people playing. I remember there was a moment where a couple of playtesters told us they reached 100 games played together. And yes, so yeah. But the other thing that made it possible was that the game was enjoyable from the very beginning.
Right.
Even if the game was not perfect, people loved it immediately when they play tested it. So they couldn't wait to play another one. And so they were after us to give them feedback after their play tests and to give them the changes for the new version of the game, because of course they wanted to continue and play with the new version of the game and so on. So yeah, it was really exciting because we knew we were accomplishing something, and I'm not talking about a commercial success. I'm talking about accomplishing the goal of making a game that was really true to the sources and was something that a very serious fan of the Lord of the Rings would be interested in.
Yeah.
Instead of having, like a simple Risk-like game or a card game or whatever, we knew that the game had everything for that type of gamer. That was a game that allowed you to replay the story every time in a way that felt real, that felt out of the books.
Yeah, I remember one of the times I was playing with my brother, and there's like a Paths of the Dead card. I forget what it is, but there's like some very specific situations that need to happen for it to work. And I luckily just avoided my brother doing that against me just by accident. Just didn't know about it, but just moved one of my units in a way that he could no longer do it. But it was that close to him just being able to take the whole game. So there's so many little bits like that, and then it's an incredible game.
Yeah, I like the fact that there's specific things, but the same specific things can actually pan out to be slightly different or very different, but in a way that still feels that it could have happened in the books. So it's not something that you have. I mean, I don't mean to disrespect the old classic by SPI that was called the same name of our game, War of the Ring. That game was very important to us as gamers, and it was very important to us also as designers, because we kept in mind the existence of that game before. That game, they tried to do the same thing that our game does. But there were things there that always, made our inner Tolkien purist inside to go, I don't like that. Because, for example, there was a randomized way to feature monsters in key places. Like you could have always a monster in the Misty Mountains, one in the Mountains of Shadow, and so on. But they were random, so you could have Shelob in the Misty Mountains, and have just a renegade troll just invented for that someplace. So that was a bit like, okay. It was too different for us to feel. It was too gamey. And so I think that I think we accomplished in making a game that feels diverse enough to be fun, but at the same time faithful to the books.
So, what do you find the most challenging or the most fun part of working in Middle Earth?
It's a two-sided medal. I mean, it's because it's fantastic to have so much information.
Hmm.
It's of course one of the fantasy worlds with the most information about
Yeah.
it, and especially with the most consistent information.
Hmm.
It's a world that you can think about things that are not described in the books if you just follow the same rules of the rest.
Right.
Okay. So, for example, if you need to invent some historical fact that Tolkien never described,
Hmm.
you can, of course, be inspired by all the things that he described elsewhere, and maybe adapt to a different environment, and you obtain something that feels authentic, even if it's not the same. Uh, but of course, the same limitations are sometimes crippling because if I think when we're talking especially about role playing games in this case,
Hmm.
when you write a role playing game adventure, it's extremely difficult to do one for the One Ring that feels authentic.
Yeah.
You may not care about authenticity because it's your table, and I'm totally fine with that. But when we do published material, we have to stick to the authenticity because we need to make examples of things that can happen that feel that they belong to the Lord of the Rings. And sometimes that makes it very hard to come up with something fresh, with something engaging. I mean, the easiest example is the bestiary. If you think about Dungeons and Dragons, that one of the main pillars of the whole game is having hundreds of different monsters. So every time that you play a game, you have something you've never seen before.
Hmm.
You can have something you've never seen before, so you can surprise your players as a game master by putting this strange thing from here and so on. With the Lord of the Rings, you have a very narrow roster of creatures that can use in adventures, and it's very hard to invent plausible ones.
Yeah.
So that's one thing that we always have to be very careful of what we do, because you want to avoid having the usual orcs and goblins and this and that. So uh, yeah, so that forces you to be extra creative because you need to, if you have, and you must have the same creatures over and over again, you need to place them in different uh, landscapes, different situations, not to feel repetitive.
Yeah. Yeah. When you were setting out to make the first edition of the One Ring, was there anything you wanted to accomplish there that you hadn't seen in like Middle Earth role playing or whatever came before?
Oh yes, I when I started thinking about what needed to be there, I didn't think much about the previous iterations of games set in Middle Earth because they were too distant from the moment where I was designing the game. I mean, Middle Earth role playing was a huge success at the time and is very well loved up to today, but it is very much the product of its own time. So it was a game that didn't need to respect the authenticity that I was talking about a few moments ago. And the importance of for a role playing game at that time was probably to have a lot of variety and have more magic because it was a fantasy role playing game. So I think that Middle Earth role playing at the time brought, uh, to be different from Dungeons and Dragons, brought the whole strength of the history of Middle Earth. So you could feel you were part of the history of Middle Earth because you were playing during the King's Strife in armor and so on. But they tried to do two things at the same time, to be authentic but also to just feel very much like a fantasy role playing game, and the two things were not necessarily possible to they were it was not possible to make them coexist all the time. So for many players, especially people that were coming from the books, I felt, for example, to the game to be not really able to give me the Middle Earth experience I was looking for. And the Decipher game that came years later was so strongly connected to the movies, but especially it was very much the type of game that at the time it was uh, everybody was doing. And so games that were very much inspired by Dungeons and Dragons, because the game system was extremely similar. 3d6s instead of d20, but all the rest was the same type, the same blueprint. And at the time, the focus was on developing a character. So it was more about, okay, what's the difference between if I'm playing a Gondorian guardian rather than an elven archer and so on. So it was all about special abilities and stuff like that. So when I started designing the game, I wanted to have a number of things there that I tried to extract from the books. And I sometimes make this comparison with science fiction games. If you have a space opera type of game, you need to have things like character creation, you need some sort of mechanics to resolve actions from combat to social actions, but you need to have space travel because it's a game on starships. So, and for Middle Earth, journeys were exactly that. You needed to have a robust set of rules for traveling because what they do in the books is traveling all the time. It's a game about journeys to reach a place and so we could not simply say, okay, you leave Rivendell and then after 3 days you arrive in Bree. Otherwise, I mean, The Lord of the Rings, would be like 50 pages long if that was the focus of the story. So,
Yeah.
so journeys had to be part of that. And the other thing I wanted to feel totally ingrained in the game was cultural differences. Was that characters needed to be different, not because it's just an elf or a dwarf or a man, but they needed to feel different because they were coming from Wilderland rather than from Eridor, and so on. And possibly, and the other thing is of course magic. Magic needed to be there because magic is absolutely primary in Middle Earth, but at the same time, it's not Dungeons and Dragons magic. So you cannot have spells, you cannot have wizards. It was something that I remember. It was hard to convince people at the beginning, especially during playtest, that you could not be a wizard in the game. But I really felt that it was one of the things that, even if a lot of people argued with me by saying, but it's possible because Gandalf in front of the doors of Moria says that I once knew all the spells in the language of orcs, men, and elves. It means that there were elves, orcs, and men that knew spells, and so they were wizards. And so, okay, but do you encounter any wizards or sorcerers that are not bad guys in The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit? You don't. And if I am making something so fundamental up just for the game by telling you, okay, they study created orders of wizards, and so they're extremely rare, but they are there, and you can meet them, I don't know, in the north or whatever in the east, and so you can be one of those. I was betting at the time that at least 9 groups out of 10 would have ended up by saying, yeah, okay, the game is nice, but it doesn't feel like Middle Earth because we are a wizard in the group. And the other thing that I didn't want was to make a game that offered you 300 pages of a game with all the cultures from Arda in the same place, so that you could play Gondorian and some guy from Dale. Because again, that to me was the like a joke. Okay, a Gondorian, a Rohanian, and a Hobbit enter in Bree, while it felt really like, again, it was something that for me was an element that could completely destroy your suspension of disbelief.
Hmm.
How come they're together there?
Yeah.
Why there's a guard of the citadel of Gondor in Bree together
Hmm.
with a hobbit from Archet.
Yeah.
So I purposely limited your
Hmm.
choices in the game to I mean, nothing will prevent players at some point when more and more cultures will be available to the players to make that. But
Hmm.
in that case, I will feel myself
Yeah.
like it's your game, you do what you
Yeah.
want. I tried to tell you why you shouldn't,
Yeah.
but but at least in the game, uh, just to finish the thing
Hmm.
is it's also a matter of accessibility.
Hmm.
I wanted a game that you could open, read maybe in a day or something, and then play.
Okay.
If I was giving you like an encyclopedia type of game where you you would end up spending a month in just figuring out what type of game you could
Right.
play because you have so many tools.
Hmm.
And so let's start small and eventually
Hmm.
grow bigger and bigger.
Is there any element, either like characters, location, or event, that's outside of the licensing you have that you really wish you were able to touch on?
Not really,
Really?
because yeah, uh, I think that the what we decided, the frame that we chose, the focus that we chose for first edition, then for second edition, were the ones that were absolutely the perfect spot in time and as the place is concerned to play your own Tolkien saga
Hmm.
in Middle Earth because the time frame between The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings is familiar to everybody who
Yeah.
just saw the movies or read the books.
Hmm.
I remember that I was always a big fan of the books, but if you, I mean, having read the book several times already a long time ago, but if you at the time asked me, but what about the history of the Second Age, or what about the war between Angmar and Arnor,
Hmm.
I wouldn't have known anything about
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
because I wasn't so interested in reading and rereading the appendixes of the
Hmm.
books. I was more into the story of the actual story, the story of The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings. So for me, the decision of choosing more open time frames, like centuries before, it felt like I mean, it robbed me really of the idea of playing in Middle Earth
Okay.
because I could not recognize
Hmm.
the names of the places. So yeah, it's possible. It's nice to eventually be given the chance to do that, but uh, the core experience of a game set in the Lord of the Rings should be between The Hobbit and the Lord of the Rings,
Right.
because all the characters, all the peoples are there, all the familiar names are
Hmm.
that belong to that time. So yeah, maybe it would be nice to do a different game
Right.
based on other parts of the Legendarium because, for example, I don't think that making a game on the second age or the first age could really make use of the One Ring as it is,
Okay.
especially the first stage. The first
Sure.
stage
Yeah.
should be a different type of game.
Hmm.
I mean, I tried to give some emphasis on playing as a group, as a fellowship.
Hmm.
If I was to make a game on the first stage, it would probably be much more focused on individual
Right.
strengths of
Hmm.
characters, flaws and strengths
Hmm.
of characters.
Right.
It will be harder to make a game because you still have to have a group of players.
Yeah. Hmm.
But anyway, yeah, who knows?
Yeah. So coming back to the third age, when either your team is rating an adventure or when fans are rating adventures, what do you think is kind of the important themes that you think have to be in a Middle Earth adventure?
There's a sweet spot between being too epic and being too mundane.
Hmm.
For example, I remember Sometimes it happens. I read some plots about adventures set in the Middle Earth, and I think about, okay, but could this be set in any other fantasy game?
Okay.
If the answer is yes, it's probably not a good adventure
Mm.
for Middle Earth, because I always take the example of, because I remember some friends, we played an adventure with Middle Earth role playing that was about being the accompanying a caravan of merchants someplace.
Okay.
And that felt so mundane because there was nothing there that really made it feel like it was. It could be Dungeons and Dragons, could
Yeah.
be any other fantasy game. So, and on the other hand, you cannot go epic all the time. You cannot always have to deal with Elrond and Galadriel and being invested with some incredibly important quest.
Yeah.
So it needs to be really interspersed. I mean, I think the One Ring is a campaign game. You can play satisfactory one shots for sure,
Mhm.
but I think that the best way is to play campaign because you can be selective. You can have adventures with a lower level of epic engagement
Mhm.
and others that are more. But eventually, it's the whole narrative arc that needs to be important in the history
Yeah.
of the art.
Mhm.
So it's like, when Gareth was writing the Darkening of Mirkwood,
Mhm.
and that was originally my playtest campaign, and we were discussing themes. So Gareth is an amazing writer, and he always has ways to make interesting even the most mundane things.
Okay.
But if you check the arc of that campaign, there are a lot of things happening, but there's the real epic thing is the whole is the thing as a whole.
Mhm.
And it is basically about exactly the title, The Darkening of Mirkwood.
Mhm.
It's about what happens to Mirkwood between the Hobbit and the Lord of the Rings. Why why Mirkwood is described again as a dark forest in the hands of the enemy, when the Hobbit ended with the possibilities of a new era of peace
Right. Yeah.
in the area. So why did that happen? That was a perfect story hook for us
Mhm.
to exploit. And so I think that the thing that needs to be there in an adventure are small things that possibly build up to something bigger.
Okay.
So it's like, I think that Tolkien once said that it is easier to describe to evoke the feeling of something fantastical or something epic by just hinting at it
Mhm.
rather than describe it. If you
Yeah.
see, I think it says, if you see a fairy's tower from a distance between the clouds and you just see it for a fleeting moment, it is easier to just you start thinking about what's in there.
Yeah.
When you start describing it, you're either a master of fantasy fiction, or it's easy for the whole thing to fall apart,
Right.
because it's I mean, your mind, when you're not told what's in there, goes to the most possible extreme
Mhm.
solutions, and anything is possible. And so I think that when you do an adventure, you should hint at big things like that.
Okay.
I don't. It's not by coincidence that the Lord of the Rings is set in the Third Age, a time where it seems that most of the big things already happened.
Right.
There
Yeah.
were gods walking. There were gods walking the earth, and they're not there anymore. And but all that is done exactly because you can have characters that can say when the gods walk the earth,
Yeah.
and and finding ruins and stuff like that. So
Mhm.
yeah, so I think you should do the same in an adventure. Hint at potential huge mysteries.
Mhm.
Maybe witness a monster that comes from some dark place and then goes back to that dark place,
Right. Okay.
and you don't follow.
Yeah. I was listening to one of your another podcast that you had talked on, and you were saying how you like the landmark adventure system that you're
Oh
using for
yeah.
these books more than like a big pre-written campaign. Um, is there any intention to do more stuff like Tales from the Lone Lands that are more of a written story? Or
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I know that's me fighting against the current, because I see
okay.
that a lot of people like the actual campaign frames
hmm
and written adventures.
hmm
I can totally understand why. It's easier to just sit down and read
hmm
a nice adventure if it is nice and present it to your players. In my specific case, when I play the game and other games also, I like this emergent experience when you can follow your players as much as they follow you
Okay.
as the game master. So if my players say, "Oh, no, okay, we had this rumor talking about an island on Lake Nenuyal.
hmm
Let's go and see that." The landmarks are perfect for that. You don't have to read a lot.
hmm
Okay, they're going there. I'm reading this, and I'm done for as prep
Okay.
goes for the evening. So I like that because it is like the campaign becomes a sort of drawing made of dots that eventually they start to be connected,
Hmm.
and so you also as the GM you have more fun because you don't know exactly what's coming out of the drawing at
Right.
the end.
hmm
You're going to be surprised as much as you play instead of being the guy that knows everything already.
Okay.
Oh, I can't wait for them to get here. And so you have to wait for them to actually find the thread, the following the thread that you were setting for them. But of course, it's harder. It's
hmm
a harder job. So I'm trying to combine the two things. We made Ruins of of the Lost Realm and Tales from the Lone Lands. So you have landmarks and campaign frames, and on the other book you have written adventures. And so we're very much doing the same in the next installments. At Gen Con, there will be a new one announced.
Okay.
A new book that is almost
Okay.
finished. So
So that'll be the
yeah,
starter sets being
and
released, and then you'll announce the new one.
yeah, and
Okay.
that's that's going to be something a little different.
Okay. Awesome. Um,
I can tell. I'm afraid I can't tell.
yeah.
The people in Free League will send the Nazgul.
Do you have a favorite heroic culture and calling from second edition that you like the most?
Um, I have to limit myself to second edition.
Or first edition? Yeah,
Well,
if you
okay,
go
second
first edition
edition
too.
is, but it's fine. Yeah, first edition. I have a soft spot for the Woodmen of Mirkwood
Okay.
because they were, of course, very important in first edition,
hmm
and we now have them again in second edition with the Woodland cultures booklet that we did, and I like them because they are the ones that I had the more authorial uh, agency there
Okay.
because we know nothing about the Woodmen of Mirkwood, but they are described as a fairly large population in the Anduin Vale. We have a lot of information. I'm totally sure that Tolkien himself, he was inspired by the books by William Morris,
Hmm.
called The Out of the World Things and
Yep.
The Roots of
I've
the
got that book
Mountains.
behind me.
And so I used those books to flesh out
Okay.
the Woodmen of Mirkwood. So they're very much a William Morris culture,
hmm
and and so and I think they came out like a perfect fit
Right.
for the game, for the mood, and for the world.
hmm
I love the fact that they are tamers of beasts. I mean,
hmm
with dogs,
Yeah.
and so in a way that makes a connection to the Rohirrim that are tamers of horses instead,
hmm
but still connected to animals, but in the Anduin bit. So yeah, I think those ones were absolutely my favorite for that specific reason because I feel they belong more to me than the others.
Okay, right. And when creating like the cultural specific virtues for cultures like that aren't very covered, um, is it when you're thinking of those, do you go, okay, it would be good to have a mechanic that gives a bonus to this ability, for example, and then build a virtue around that, or is it all pulled from
No, I
themes first?
unfortunately I take the longest route because instead of starting from what I need from a mechanical point of view, I always start from what I feel is better to portray the culture,
Right.
and that sometimes create conflicts
Mhm.
because sometimes you say, these guys should be good in doing this. Oh no, we already have these guys doing that.
Right.
And okay, so how do we make the same thing but different? They
Yes.
feel different enough. Uh, Yes, it's like when I'm designing a thematic game, it's the same thing. I always start from the end result, so I always start from the source. I
Right.
really need to for the virtue to feel appropriate to the culture. Of course, there's a long work in also trying to make the virtues effective and balanced and not repeating other virtues in the game. So sometimes there may have been sacrifices where I renounced some virtue that I felt was appropriate but was doing the same thing of
Right.
somebody else, or maybe in the end it didn't give a unity of effect to the culture. It felt too strange, and so yeah, it's a long work. I think it's the biggest part of designing the One Ring is to do that because as you add more cultures, you multiply the potential superimpositions between abilities and we know that I mean even if I don't feel the One Ring to be that type of game, the type
Mhm.
of game where you have to create a build, it's not like you have a set of thousands of tools and you put them together and create characters. You have very narrow options compared to other games. So the point is not that. The point is just to create a character that belongs to the alert. Uh, but still, we need to cater to the need of the player to have a character that is is a custom character that is
Mhm.
your character. Is not the character of somebody else. So yeah, there's a lot of work in trying to do that, developing abilities and things that are cool and different and useful.
Yeah.
Because of course, that when you start playing, you quickly find out that okay, this ability sounded really cool, but I'm not using it at all.
Okay. Yeah.
So why is he using all his talents all the time? There's so
Right.
a much better fit to the game. So
Mhm.
they need to fit the game, not simply the world.
Okay. Is it challenging at all to not have kind of this power creep as you're coming up with new things? And I was thinking about that with like the War of the Ring expansions. When you're adding new stuff, is it hard to remember this has to fit perfectly with the base game and not be overpowering now?
Yeah, we I mean, there's certainly no desire to make a conscious power creep. I
Hmm.
mean, it's not like we need you to buy new expansions because the new characters are stronger. So we try absolutely to avoid that. Uh, that's a potential danger
Hmm.
because you really, especially when you try to portray some characters that can be seen as more powerful than others
Yeah.
simply from the sources. Because when you try to describe the Dunedain or high elves,
Hmm.
I mean it's hard to to avoid and making them simply too powerful. But
Hmm.
in that case, I always try to also to point out to people considering this as a potential problem that why then the Fellowship of the Ring is not composed all of Dunedain and High
Right.
Elves?
Hmm.
There must be something that explains the thing. That is not
Yeah.
simply. I mean, if you consider it from the point of view of a real world, and so we always try to give drawbacks or strengths to,
Mm.
to potentially less powerful cultures that made for that.
Hmm.
Some are really easy, of course. Hobbits that may sound like the weakest of the bunch. They have extraordinary resilience
Yes.
and to corruption and so on. So we try to do exactly this.
Hmm.
Otherwise, of course, you end up with. I remember groups playing Middle Earth or playing where you have companies of Noldor
Yeah.
going around Middle Earth and trying to destroy the Gundor and so on. So yeah,
Yeah. I've heard a quote that players will optimize the fun out of any game. So just like they will just go with the course that will win, not necessarily the one that's the most fun or most
but
interesting.
that's it's interesting because it's not their fault.
Hmm.
It's a fault of the game.
Right.
If you have a game that has a shorter route to victory, whatever you consider victory to be,
Hmm.
people will take it. I
Hmm.
mean, I remember one criticism that was leveled at the time for games like Dungeons and Dragons that, for example, money, gold was giving you experience,
Hmm.
and of course that pushes players to accumulate money and
Yeah.
to rob and to
Hmm.
desecrate tombs full of gold
Yeah.
and so on. That's the point of the game. You want to level up, and so you will end up doing that, and that's the game telling you. It's not. I mean, you cannot make a game that gives you such a way to victory and pretend that you will and require you to resist the temptation.
Yes.
So it was. I remember I played quite a bit of Vampire the Masquerade, for example, and one of the big quandaries in that game was exactly that. It was the other killing other vampires and
Right.
sucking their blood. It was a huge taboo in the game world, but it was absolutely the fastest way to become more powerful as the game mechanics were concerned.
Right.
In that case, it was interesting because the game was supposed to be slightly more mature than Dungeons and Dragons, so it was fine to. But it was I found it always to be a bit too nasty that game designers were dangling the carrot in front of your face and telling you you shouldn't do that.
Yeah. Yeah. So is that why
So
you decided to do a pretty abstract version of Treasure in the One Ring? It's just you have Treasure Point, but you're not going
that's
out.
another selfish. That's another sort of selfish reason, but it's again two reasons. One is sticking to the source, and the other
Yeah.
one is to play the way I like to play.
Hmm.
I always played games where I found the accounting of wealth to be extremely boring,
Okay.
and equipment and gold.
Hmm.
In some games, it is part of how you create a character. And so you have to optimize that and get more treasure because you can get access to better equipment and so on. But I found that to be extremely unheroic and boring.
Right.
That you would end up buying the magical sword
Hmm.
instead of finding it. And
Yeah.
so, and also, and so I always played games where money was not a concern at all. And if it was, we basically ignored it
Yeah.
and played it in a different way. And and the other part is authenticity. Money is mentioned probably three times
Okay.
in the whole Lord of the Rings, and so and instead gold is mentioned much more uh, as far as lost gold, lost
Right.
treasure is concerned, and so it was about that finding that gold. But then you ask yourself, okay, but what are the characters doing with that gold in the books?
Hmm.
Basically nothing. I mean, you don't know about that. They probably invest, they spend it, whatever. Probably, yeah, we know for sure that Bilbo built his wealth out of the gold that he got
Hmm.
from the trolls in the Hobbit, but it's out of the frame, it's out of the,
Sure.
the, the picture. You don't see that. So I try to replicate that with the system that makes it like a sort of an off-screen activity and not something that you do in the game.
Awesome. I have a question from somebody on the Discord, Dan W, who is wondering about: do you have advice on running things like skill endeavors? And this could maybe go under councils or something too, to not feel like it's just dice rolls, but how do you really build a narrative around a system like that?
Yeah, I think that I don't know if it's a mistake I made, but I felt that the skill endeavors were important
Okay.
to be featured because sometimes they do the trick. They actually give you the sensation of running against time and doing something that is lengthy. You can use the rules for something that otherwise is just hand waved by the GM,
Mhm.
and so it's a good tool. It is a good tool for the GM, for the lore master, and the players. But I'm afraid that people tend to overuse them.
Okay.
Like every time there's a situation that may require a skill endeavor, they use it. I
Mm.
see it also in people writing adventures.
Okay.
It is felt like, okay, this needs an endeavor, I'm putting an endeavor.
Mm.
Where I don't think adventure should have a moment where it is mandatory to use a skill endeavor,
Right.
because I think it's very much a contingental thing to happen in the game. You, as the lore master and the players, should feel the moment where you need a skill endeavor. Maybe because the moment the gameplay is slowing too much, and dice rolling now should help out with the mood, and or the situation really requires it. But otherwise, a skill roll is fine. A
Mhm.
skill roll is enough. It shouldn't be necessary to start breaking down it point by point.
Mhm.
So I think in general, people should ask themselves, do I really need a skill level here? Because if the situation is not the most appropriate one, yes, it becomes a series of rolls. And the lore master can find it hard to picture the situation. No, you roll again. If instead, if it's following the gameplay and suiting the moment, then absolutely, but they should not be mandatory. The same thing as journeys. Of course, if you're making it, because journeys are a sort of a skill, of an articulated skill endeavor. But if it is, of course, 3 weeks or something, you should use the journal rules. But also in that case, if there's no hurry, if it's something that people that the players are absolutely traveling at leisure, and it's just connecting point A to point B,
Mhm.
you don't need to chart the whole
Right.
thing and make the rules. Especially if you don't feel it's going to be dangerous for any reasons.
Right.
Of course, if you're going through Mirkud, if you're going through the Misty Mountains, or you should do that. But
Mhm.
otherwise, you can. Those are always tools.
Okay.
It's tools. So
Awesome. Well, looking ahead a bit, so we're about a week away from the full official release of the new starter set. What was the decision to make a new box set?
well, there was a commercial reason behind it, and at first, I think it was some distributor that asked Free League for a cheaper version of the starter set, because our starter set is pretty expensive, and that's why we put so much effort into it and so much
Yeah.
stuff into it.
Hmm.
And also in retrospect, when we did the 5e version of the Shire material in a book, we realized that all that stuff, all that material belonged to its own supplement instead of
Hmm.
being confined to the starter set. It's a bit of a pity that all that material that was fantastically done by James Mann, and we worked a lot on it for mood, and so I really love the starter set. But limiting it to that felt like a waste, especially after seeing that it could be a very nice supplement like the
Hmm.
one that we did for Feige. So when the commercial need arose, we decided to do something that was much more reasonable in terms of costs, but also more likely a starter set.
Okay.
Something that gives you a more rounded experience of what it feels to play the One Ring, not limited only to hobbits, more like an adventure game and so on.
Hmm.
Then it was nice to add all those little things like the cardboard characters and the combat diagram that we had for the Moria Kickstarter. So
Mhm.
I think, yeah.
Okay.
And also, I mean, it has one of the best covers I've seen. It's an amazing cover by Antonio De Luca. Fantastic. So yeah, I think that
I was just going to wonder who wrote the new adventure. I don't actually
the
have my
new
copy.
adventure, it's a complicated story because it
Okay.
started as a first draft by sorry. Anyway, it was the first draft that was completely changed
Okay.
by me mainly, working a little bit with because I play tested it a lot, so
Hmm.
it changed in. It changed also thanks to the feedback of Thomas Herenstam from Free
Okay.
Living his
Hmm.
group because they played it also, and so yeah, but it's mainly my own work,
Okay.
and so yeah, it's a shorter. It packs more action in a shorter span, and I hope that I'm sure it is. I mean, the what a starter set should be compared to the original.
Okay.
The original was sort of a challenge because I really liked the idea of something that was almost a game in itself,
Okay.
a
Yeah.
game about hobbits, a
Hmm.
game about hobbits having adventures,
Right.
what they think are adventures in the
Hmm.
Shire.
Awesome. With the original starter set, will that still be printed as the box set, or is that going to be kind of phased out?
No, no. The idea is to do. I mean, that's one of the things, but it was already hinted at and more or less approved that we're
Okay.
going to do the same thing we did for 5e. So it's going to
Okay.
be repackaged as a separate supplement.
Hmm. Awesome.
So yeah, so that's the old starter set will eventually be out out of print.
Okay. And so, are you going to be doing more lead writing now? Because I think you mentioned recently that your contract with Simon has ended. Are you finished that? So, are
Yeah,
you?
yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, I was free to write before also because my contract was not exclusive from that
Okay.
point of view, but I didn't have time.
Right.
And so yes, in fact, I was recently on a I had a few days off and I took the chance to start thinking about another supplement that but we'll have to discuss between now and October with Freeling where exactly we're going with the game. We already have some stuff done.
Hmm.
Uh, so yeah, I will be more involved
Okay.
in
Awesome.
first person in the game. Together, I work especially apart from Marco Maggi, my co-designer for most of the things that I do.
Hmm.
For the role-playing game, I work especially. I look forward to look especially with Umberto Pignatelli, who's a fantastic writer,
Okay.
and Michele Garbuggio is already been working with me since a long time now on the mechanical parts.
Right.
He started more as the guy who did the 5e conversion,
Hmm.
and but actually he started it as a huge fan of the game
Okay.
because he contacted us because he was playing the game. He was already doing. There's some fun produced stuff out there by him.
Okay.
Yeah. And so yeah, he knows the game even better than I do. And so yeah, it's easy to rely on him on stuff and brainstorming. So
Awesome. How many
there will
projects
be
are you
more.
is constantly in the works? Like, are you kind of doing one step at a time, or do you have a whole bunch of things going?
Well, when I was with Simon, we thought we probably were at the peak as far as working at the same time on different projects at the same time. Because we really had like, I think there was a moment where I counted like 10 different projects going on at the same time. Yeah, and we're dialing that down a
Yeah.
bit now. But yes, because we always have two fronts, that is board games and
Mhm.
role-playing games.
Okay.
It's two very different game design experiences, and
Hmm.
I'm lucky to be able to work on both
Yeah.
because You can have different moments where one is easier than the other, and vice versa.
Hmm.
And so we are mainly working now on War of the Ring stuff and the One Ring,
Okay.
because War of the Ring we have several projects going on, and the One Ring we continue, and the idea
Hmm.
is to accelerate
Right.
the production stuff. And I'm also following a lot the art direction
Okay.
of the two lines, both
Hmm.
both for the War of the Ring and the One Ring,
Hmm.
together with Antonio De Luca, for example, especially as far as the One Ring is concerned. But yeah, we always try to have at least another couple of things, like
Hmm.
starting the development for a new board game. Luckily, here at the studio, we were. It's always me and Marco, so we find it very easy to compartmentalize and share
Hmm.
things. Uh, Nowadays, in general, it's me more working on roleplay games and Marco working on board games. But
Okay.
being in the same place is perfect to
Hmm.
exchange and share
Yeah.
ideas and stuff.
Is there any part of Middle Earth that you're even way down the line that you're most excited to get to, whether that's Mordor or Gondor or beyond?
Yeah. I mean, we already have stuff going south,
Okay.
and so that's very exciting. I'm a bit afraid of that, but
Hmm.
because I think that compared to Wilderland, that had its specific mood,
Hmm.
Eriador had a slightly different thing, more desolate, more forgotten things
Hmm.
and ruins, and possibly some potential hints at the coming war. Gondor and Rohan is, I think that when we were there with first edition,
Hmm.
we made some fantastic stuff, a couple of very good supplements, but we leaned a bit too heavily on the mundane part.
Okay.
It was, I think that the way we treated Rohan was a little too realistic.
Hmm.
It was less about the wonder of Middle Earth,
Hmm.
and I can make you an example. I mean, we treated Fangorn in a way that was very detailed,
Okay.
where 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 Fangorn should be all about history.
Hmm.
You don't go there. You shouldn't know about what the Ents do during the day.
Yeah.
There's no point at all
Hmm.
in exploring that. We're not making an anthropological, ethnological treaty. We should be able to tell you how people in Rohan see
Hmm.
Fangor rather than see from the inside.
Right.
So, so I want to have that sort of quality in the material that we will have there. But yes, we are going there. What I think I'm looking for more eagerly is when we will be able to feature characters from outside northwestern Middle Earth into the
Okay.
game,
Hmm.
because I really want to have some renegade Easterling coming to Middle Earth and
Hmm.
escaping from refusing the to be a subject of Sauron
Yeah.
in the east, and possibly somebody from Umbar or from the south.
Hmm.
So we will still. Yeah, another thing that we're going to do differently from first edition is that the landscape will always be northwestern Middle Earth. So
Okay.
we're not going to make a supplement on Farahad,
Okay.
okay? Because again, if we go there, it's going to be it's not going to be Middle Earth for me,
Hmm.
because Tolkien didn't write anything about
Yeah.
Farahad, so we would invent everything, and it would feel so different
Yeah.
from the mood of the Lord of the Rings that it would be a different game. It's like making I don't know. Legend of the Five Rings was based on a sort of China Japan
Right.
crossover, and then they made Tales from I don't remember now the name of Arabian Nights. I mean, it was the same game, same world, but they had to make a different game to tackle a completely different culture.
Yes.
So it would feel like that to me. So in general, when I think of new cultures for the game, it needs always to be people leaving their home to go adventuring.
Hmm.
So the typical hobbit is not the hobbit of the Shire working as a fisherman
Yeah.
or on the fish market. Is the guy who left his home to go adventuring.
Hmm.
And sometimes when we were making cultures for first edition, it felt more like, okay, this is the typical guy from Gondor.
Hmm. Right.
Like in the Adventure Companion, we had that. I want to frame the future cultures that we will have more like people that left their
Okay.
country to go someplace. So when we will have the Riders of Rohan characters, they're not going to be the Huskarls of King Theoden. They're going to be a Rohan adventurer
Right.
leaving the place. So it will be easier to create companies of characters. Otherwise, if you have a guard of the citadel, how come he's there and he's not
Yeah. Right.
watching his post in the citadel? And I would love to see that for more exotic cultures. So
Okay.
like people from Rune or from
Mhm.
Harad and so on.
I think we're nearly done. But if people have somehow got this far and haven't played the One Ring, why should they play the One Ring?
Well, well, well. Well, of course, I think that if you are a fan, I needless to say that if you're a fan of Tolkien, of the stories, or
Mhm.
even the movies or the TV show Rings of Power, and you are in some ways intrigued by what you've seen,
Mhm.
and you want to try your hand at a fantasy game instead of trying another generic fantasy game or another
Mhm.
fantasy game, you should try this one because I mean, we if you liked something in those books or those shows, you will probably find it in the game
Mhm.
uh, because it's not simply again a game system made to play generic adventures. It's
Mhm.
very much geared towards the fan of, of the world created by Tolkien. So otherwise, if you play fantasy games in general, maybe try a hand at something that is trying to make the limitations of a somewhat less fantastical world can be considered in a way low fantasy compared
Yeah.
to other game worlds, and to see how those limitations make for a more satisfying experience. In my That's my own
Mhm.
taste because I have a problem with high fantasy because I can never expect something. I mean, because everything is possible
Yeah.
from meeting I don't know a mechanical construct made by a mad wizard and
Mhm.
finding I don't know a living island, whatever is possible. That's of course the strength of a game like that.
Mhm.
But I feel that if you play a game that has stricter limits, there's a fascination in there too,
Right.
because it's closer to us in some ways. I think you can have an experience that feels more authentic,
Mhm.
with elements like friendship and sacrifice and stuff and so on. So
Right. Do you have a favorite character or scene from the book, or is there something that is kind of stuck out to you that you hadn't really noticed in a recent read through?
I sometimes change my pick, but I often go back to the passages with Eowyn
Okay.
because I really like the fact that she was such a well thought out female character,
Hmm.
and and in a way it compensates for the lack of characters of female characters in the book because she's so well defined and
Hmm.
to the expense of other characters because I always like the exchange between her and Aragorn when Aragorn wants to leave for the path of the dead,
Hmm.
and he tries to convince her that she has to stay behind for reasons,
Hmm.
but the reasons are not there. In the end, she's right, and the only reason is that she is supposed to stay back because to stay behind because she's a woman, and Aragorn cannot really find a better reason than that.
Right.
And so I really find incredibly modern the approach, and so and it's and I like also those little linguistic jokes that Tolkien makes in Rohan. So when she is traveling incognito as a writer, she chooses the name Dernhelm,
Hmm.
and Dernhelm in Anglo-Saxon means the helm of her secrecy.
Oh,
And
really?
so, yeah, she goes around as being called I'm incognito.
Right. I did
Dernhelm,
not know that.
yeah, Dernhelm means helm of her secrecy.
Right.
And so, yeah, no, it's really nice. And of course, yeah, the cherry on top is when she kills off the Witch King, whatever the tractors say. That, oh, but it was the blade of the West End. The blade of the West End
Right.
is okay. Not really. It's
No.
the two things
Yeah.
combined. So,
That's
yeah,
great.
I like that.
So, lastly, where's the best place for people to find you online and keep tabs on what you're doing?
I tend not to stay much online because I mean there was a very good forum way back at the time still when Cubicle 7 were publishing the game, and it was easy for me to be there. And but now we don't have that anymore, and there's Discord. Discord is a huge, it's a fantastic place for interaction, but it's also difficult to follow
Okay.
because you cannot. I mean, it's not built in a way that you can go back and see things,
Okay.
and so yeah, I found it quite uh, hard. In that case, I rely on people like Michele, for example, Garbujo, who tells me, "Oh, there's this guy saying this on," and I can go there and see. But what I really like with social interaction with games is that the fans eventually become self-referential, and I like that. I mean, people are asking questions that are supposed to be answered by the creator, but
Right.
there's people that know already the answer, so they answer for you. And I like that. But otherwise, yeah, I'm just a little bit active on Facebook, but yeah, not much. I'm leaving tomorrow for Helsinki
Okay.
for a convention called Ropicon.
Hmm.
So I'll be there
Awesome.
interacting live with people.
That's great. Well, I'm
Yeah.
super excited. I've ordered my starter set, but haven't got it yet, obviously, and then very excited to hear what the new announcement will be soon. But other
Yeah.
than that, thank you so much for speaking with me, Francesco. It was a very big honor.
Oh, it was pretty good for me. Really, a privilege to have such dedicated fans. Absolutely. Thank you very much.
Thanks.